In this video, I will explain how to determine the proportionate sample that can represent the population. This formula can be used later on when you need to do a research and need to determine the proper number of sample. Consider a confidence interval for mean with a known population standard deviation. Recall that the confidence interval is the point estimate with the interval as wide as twice the margin error. You do not want the sample mean to deviate from the population mean by more than the margin error for a given level of confidence. Thus, to determine the number of sample that is appropriate, we can derive it from the margin of error formula. Suppose E is the margin error, thus let us rearrange the margin error formula and result on the formula N here, which can be used to calculate the number of sample appropriate to represent our population. As a note, sometimes we use the sample standard deviation from a pre-selected sample as the population standard deviation, or another choice for population standard deviation is to use an estimate of the population standard deviation from prior studies. Finally, if the lowest and highest possible values of the population are available, a rough approximation for the population standard deviation is given by standard deviation. The range of the standard deviation divided by 4 can be used as the standard deviation. In the same logic, to calculate the reasonable number of sample for estimating the population proportion, we derive from the margin error of our confidence interval for population proportion. Take the margin error formula and then rearrange it and get the formula to count the number of sample as follows. To estimate the population proportion, we can use pre-selected sample proportion at the planning stage, or use an estimate of the proportion from prior studies, or if a reasonable estimate of the population proportion is not available, we can use P equals to 0.5 as a conservative estimate to derive the optimal sample size.